those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Bob Mills. My wife Jenny and I lived in Windsor for most all of our lives before we moved up into the North Woods where we live now. And what to say about Harold? We spent a lot of time with Harold. Just think of the biggest apple tree you could possibly imagine growing in Maine, covered with hundreds of beautiful red apples. Up on the top of that tree, way up on the top, where nobody could get it, was this really big apple, red and juicy and just hanging. And you said to Harold, "Harold, would you help me harvest this tree?" Harold said, "Of course I would." And Harold would look up at that big apple on the top of that tree. He'd pick all them apples, every single one. He'd place them safely in the box without getting them marred. And when he was all done, he'd look back up at that tree. Harold would take the time. He'd figure out something. And he'd get that apple, get it into that box where it belongs with the other apples. A few days ago, my wife and I were at her folks' house having breakfast. The phone rang and it was Sarah. Sarah said, Harold was passed. Well, to be truthful, we was expecting it. We didn't want it to happen, but we know it needed to happen. And this memory comes flushing through my brain. Years ago, I mean a lot of years ago, back in the 70s, I've known Harold since about 1959. Was this cold winter day, zero, snowing so hard that you couldn't see your feet, zero, the wind blowing. I decided I had to take my snowmobile and ride over to the folks' house. Well, that path would take me across 3 Mile Pond. I get down on 3 Mile Pond and I'm going along, it's hard to see, and there's this hump on the ice. I said, what is that? I don't want to run into that. I get closer and closer and closer, and it's Harold. Harold had lugged his gear out on the ice to ice fish. He dug a hole through the ice with an ice pick by hand, and there he was in this great big old coat, Mackinac, hunched over in the worst weather you can imagine, trying to catch a fish. But I'll tell you, Harold just didn't go out there to fish. Harold went out there to catch the biggest fish that Harold could possibly catch. Now, I met Harold. Mike and I were in the same grade in grammar school. And in Windsor, we had a basketball team. We played on the basketball team. And in those days, to practice, if it snowed, we had to go out and shovel off the court. Seriously, and if the sun came out, we played in the mud. And we had our home games at Erskine Academy. And in those days, we didn't even have a bus to take us to Erskine Academy. The parents would come in their cars, load us all in there, and off we'd go. Well, Erskine Academy, if you don't know where it is Route 32 above Windsor. And just about 1.5 miles or so above Windsor, there's a Yes Man, we call it, in the road where the barber shop used to be. And late winter, it would be a wicked speed bump. You know, it would really make up into a big bump. Well, Harold and Sarah would come over to the school, load as many boys into their old red Zab as they could get in there, and off we'd go up to the school. Well, we'd be going along, because in those days we didn't have seat belts. We'd be going along and we'd get to that yes ma'am, and Harold wouldn't let off of the bed. Pile right through there, and we'd go up banging on the roof of that old Zab, and down we'd come. And you look in the rearview mirror, and there's Harold with this great big wide grin. Just a grin, and he called that bump Bobby's bump for all these years. I talked a lot of Harold. I was a veteran. I wasn't even born when Harold was in the military. But this is how Harold kind of related it to me. He said, yeah, I was in the military. Yeah. Well, what'd you do in the military, Harold? I was a ranger. You was? Yeah. Yes, I was. I said, Where'd you go? Well, he said, we fought in Europe a little bit, he said, you know, I was in there about 3 years or so, he said, and came home. And that's how he related to me. I knew better, but that's all he was saying. But what else he said was, you know, somebody had to go over there and keep the United States of America safe from people like Adolf Hitler. Sarah came home, and Harold came home, and he married Sarah. They had 2 wonderful sons, and lived 65 years with his wife. And he was a wonderful husband and a wonderful dad. And I'm going to miss Harold, because Harold was my friend, and he wasn't just any ordinary friend.